Well, tonight we're going to talk about my favorite subject, the book of Job. And it's perfect for the theme of lament. That reading we do is pretty stark, isn't it? And it gets better because I want to give you the backstory to that. I'm going to read from a translation by Robert Alter. He's a Hebrew scholar up at UC Berkeley. He's 90 years old and still probably the most preeminent Hebrew scholar in the world. And I actually had an email exchange with him one time, so there. Almost famous. Okay, let's see. So I want to start, what we read was the end of the second chapter. The first two chapters of Job are written in prose, and the other 40 are written in poetry, some of the most beautiful poetry in the world, I believe. But the first two are in prose, and there's a reason for that. A man there was in the land of Uz, Job his name. And the man was blameless and upright and feared God and shunned evil. And 7 sons were born to him and 3 daughters. And his flocks came to 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of ox, cattle, and on and on and on. He was clearly blessed by God. Now at this time, the dominant theology was something called retribution theology, which said that if you are a good person on earth, you will have good things happen to you. If you sin, you will have bad things happen to you. There's no afterlife in this time. So God being just, he has to settle all the accounts in your lifetime. So, and the interesting thing about the book of Job is that the author gives the game away right at the beginning. He says Job was upright and blameless before the Lord. So why are bad things happening to him? And that is the theme of the book. There's an interesting backstory that isn't in the Bible, and it's a rabbinic tradition, and it's, how did his friends know that he was in distress? Well, the tradition is that each of them had a big wooden walking stick. And there were 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, and Job. And each one of them had the carved images of the other 3 faces on it. And so when something happened to one of them, the visage would fall, and in Job's case, there were even tears. So they knew instantly that something was wrong with their friend. So interesting way to communicate, isn't it? TikTok had nothing on them, but so they knew something was wrong, and they gathered and came to him. Now, what you might find interesting is that it's even worse than it sounds, because Job lost all of his material possessions because of let's call it a test from God. And then he lost his health as a second phase of that test. And the whole idea was to see whether he would curse God. And of course he wouldn't. He said, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, blessed be the name of the Lord. So he passed the test, let's say. But when his friends come, and in this part of the story, they're there to comfort him. But in most of the book, they're trying to get him to fess up. Like, what did you do wrong? Because all these bad things are happening to you. You must be the reason. But in the thing I want to call attention to is what his friends do when they get there. Do they get out their little first aid kits? Do they call a lawyer to see who could be sued for this? What do? They sit with him, and first of all, they go through the motions of suffering with him. They tear their clothes, and they throw ashes on their head. And that's the very meaning of the word compassion, to suffer with someone else. And the mental picture, if you make a picture of Job in your mind, it's horrific, because he's actually been scratching himself with broken pottery. His itching is so bad. And so he looks terrible. He has blood all over him, and he's sitting in a pile of ashes. And I think the most significant thing is that his friends know that there's nothing to say. And if you've ever done any grief counseling, as I have, there really is nothing to say in profound grief. The best thing you can do is just be there. When I counsel someone who's lost someone, the first thing I always say is, what was the person's name? And so they say, it was my husband, John. Then I repeat it back. So we're grieving your husband, John. Let me get some water here. And then I just say, can I sit with you? And that's it. They may want to talk, and if they do, we talk. But if they don't, we just sit. I had an experience with a friend, a 75-year-old Episcopal bishop. I'm 75, whoops. Anyway, he was dying from brain cancer. And he didn't like it. He was hard to deal with. He did not go well into that good night, or go quietly, and I probably won't either, but I sympathized with him. And so I was able to visit him. And when I walked in the house, he was screaming at his daughter. He wanted to get up. And when I walked in the room, he didn't even say hi to me. He just said, I'm dying. And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, I don't like it. I said, I don't either. And that was all the conversation we had. I just sat down beside him and held his hand till he fell asleep. And that was the last I saw of him. But I want to point that out, because when I've had tragedies in my life, when I've had grief experiences, I had a very profound grief experience. I lost a daughter about 25 years ago. And when I came back to work, people would come up to comfort me, and they were terrified. I was their worst nightmare. They had children of their own. I wound up having to comfort them, because they just couldn't believe that this could happen to someone they knew or to themselves. So I did find people who could sit with me, and that made all the difference in the world. So I just want to leave you with that the best thing you can do to someone who's in profound grief is to sit with them. And it's the hardest thing to do, because we want to say something to calm our own anxiety. But the other person will tell you if they want to talk. So that's what I have for you. Thanks so much.